The music world moves fast. Want to stay up to date on the latest albums and get in-depth examinations with the artists? Check out Consequence of Sound, the podcast. Bite-sized album reviews for the music fan on the go who wants to stay in the know, and much more. Subscribe to the series on iTunes or your favorite podcast provider, and let the writers of Consequence of Sound steer you right. Check it out at consequenceofsound.net/COS podcast. Consequence Podcast Network.
Welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with. It's an audio interview series presented by WFPK Independent Louisville at WFPK.org, Consequence of Sound, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Take a second before we get started to hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening from right now. iTunes, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your favorite podcasts from, Spotify, YouTube, you can do it all from there. I'm Kyle Meredith. Today my guest, Durand Jones and the Indications. Specifically, I'll be talking with Durand Jones and Aaron Frazier, the duo that lead the band, talking about a new record called American Love Call. There's a specific sound that goes with this sophomore album that finds a lot more orchestration in play. We'll talk about why that happened and how it affected their lyrics. Some very poignant lyrics on this record, especially with songs like Morning in America and Long Way Home. We'll get the stories behind both of those. We also get to hear about the trick of having us guess, is it a love song or a political song? It could be either. It could be both. And some ideas on sampling and what the future holds for the band. It's Kyle Meredith with Durand Jones and the Indications.
Yes, indeed, man. How are you?
Let me give those compliments. American Love Call just being such an excellent record. Hearing you guys. So you're from right up the road. I mean, Bloomington, we're right here in Louisville. And I got to tell you, on that first record, before you guys got signed, all of my friends were texting me, asking me if I'd heard about you all. So your reputation precedes you around here.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate it.
With this record, I mean, the first thing we hear, I guess, in comparison to that first album, is the orchestration. It seems like it plays a big part on this record. And I was wondering, did you all go into it wanting that, or did the songs sort of ask for it?
I'd say this is Aaron speaking. I'd say it's a little bit of both. Our taste definitely changed over the course of touring between, after we put out the first record and then writing the second one. And we started listening to a lot more 70s soul, and the hallmarks of 70s soul are more orchestration and more vocal harmony, because they were drawing from the doo-wop groups of the 1950s. But the drums are still heavy, and that was sort of this magic balance that we loved and we were trying to strike on American Love Call.
If you're looking for that, then, if you start looking specifically in a direction 70s soul, as you're saying, do you follow suit when working on the lyrics, or does that tend to be still more personal?
It's definitely more personal. We're a group that writes a lot from our experiences, and we try to keep things contemporary. Like, soul music is a great vehicle for delivering a message, whether it's like a love message or political message in any era. And so we weren't trying to be, period perfect with our lyrical content. We're just writing what we know.
You really get that, especially, let's start, the first single. It's hard not to directly talk about that when the first song on the record, anyway, with Morning in America, because it's such a strong statement. And it's a great song on top of that. And I think both of those have to be said, because I know a lot of the tension, gets directed at those lyrics and everything. But it is a strong message. And just that phrase in itself, Morning in America, I know that Regan didn't coin it per se, but it is really associated with that era and specifically that guy when you go back in history. For you, did you take it from that, or did it mean something different for you all?
I was aware of the Reagan slogan. That wasn't exactly we weren't making a comment necessarily on the Reagan era, although, I mean, I do think the specter of the Reagan administration probably hung over the 2016 election.
Right.
It's more just like when we're traveling from town to town, we're meeting all these people of all different colors in different communities. And there's young, exciting leaders emerging. There's a lot of cool scenes blooming. Even at the kind of higher levels of politics, there are exciting leaders. But then you turn on the news and you read the larger headlines, and it's pretty bleak. So it's a weird time of like both hope and despair, and we were trying to capture that.
It has ties into something called the Poor People's Campaign, too, that I read. Could one of you all tell me about that?
Yeah, the Poor People's Campaign was a movement started by Martin Luther King Jr. shortly before his assassination. And it's a nonpartisan movement that's dedicated to working towards economic justice for people of all backgrounds. I came across a stat this year, and forgive me, I mean, I'm pulling out a stat and I can't quite remember the source, but it was 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And that's regardless of race. You know, I mean, race is an essential part of the conversation. If you're not talking about it, if you're not factoring it into your worldview, you're missing something. But at the same time, there's a lot of things that we share regardless of our racial or ethnic background, and that's, for most people in the country, that's a common economic struggle.
And I'll say further, it sounds like that goes into to the lead radio single with "Long Way Home." I mean, that's further down that comment, right?
In a way, yeah, it can be, for sure. The hook of that song in the first verse came from an area in my life where I was struggling, where it was really tough and it was really hard to get through things. So, yeah, I definitely do. I would agree with that.
It's just, I mean, I don't know how much time you guys get to spend back in Bloomington, these days with all the road, but I'm guessing it's probably a situation that we have here with a blue town in a red state, which we definitely know something about here. But I don't know, I guess I just find that really interesting, kind of being in that situation, how you can perceive, it sounds like you perceive the rest of the country and get it filtered in the songwriting. I mean, it sounds like that was a really big deal for this record, at least.
Yeah, I mean, the politics plus traveling plus our own growth as people, we tried to capture it on paper.
I mean, it's more than a political record. I mean, a lot of the songs, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's interesting because the songs seem to play two sides of the coin. I'd never can completely tell if I'm listening to a social justice song, a political song, or a heartbreak song, And I guess the heartbreak seems to be sometimes related to what's happening at large. I don't know if you meant to do that trick. Is that part of the writing?
It just happened very naturally and organically, honestly.
Well, like on a song called "Court of Love," I mean, you get that really good twist in that, right? I mean, that's one of those things where, am I listening to a love song or am I listening to something else? Yeah,
I mean, that's a good example. It definitely reflects a little bit of the I'm not quite sure how to say it. Like the politicization of people's personal relationships. Maybe when a relationship ends, accusations might fly from both sides. I mean, mostly I wanted to capture like the melodrama of that moment of a breakup, and it feels like your friends are suddenly the judge and jury, and you're appealing to them about whose fault it is, who's to blame. And doo-wop, I think, has that level of melodrama anyway, so that felt like the right context for that kind of song.
And I want to hit on one more song too, because How Can I Be Sure? It always seems like to me the second record for a lot of bands does end up being the road record, and I was really impressed and surprised that for the most part I don't hear this record as the road record. But How Can I Be Sure? It seems that's the song, right? That's the road song.
That's definitely a road song. But I also think about all my friends who are in grad school, or anytime you're chasing a dream with everything that you have, you're probably going to be sacrificing other elements of your life, and a lot of times that's going to be a relationship, whether that's romantic or platonic. When you chase that dream with everything, you make the sacrifice.
So what happens from here? I mean, I don't want to get ahead on the next record, but if you're looking at certain eras, do you guys consider maybe what the next sound will be?
I just want to write stuff that I like, and that's where I'm going to keep my heart. If it's really feeling good to me in that way, then and yeah.
Durand, I did read something about you were talking about growing up, listening to a lot of music that was based on samples. And I think maybe it was another article that came out just yesterday talking about how artists are finally starting to do that again. It kind of went away for a minute there.
It might have been Aaron, but yeah, they listened to like a lot of, hip hop where I grew up. It was filled in the streets, It's a dying art where I live now, but back in the day, yeah, a lot of dudes used to like bump that stuff in the back of their trunks, to the point where you could hear the rattle, sometimes even feel it, inside of your house as they're driving down the street. I grew up with that stuff, and I really love it. And I want to pay homage to all of the great soul songs that have been sampled by hip-hop artists. And that's always, I think that would be like an ultimate goal for us, or like the ultimate thank you is to see or hear an MC sampling our stuff and making a hip-hop track out of it.
Well, I can't give you guys enough compliments on what you're doing. We really do love American Love Call over here. Aaron, Durand, thank you both for the conversation today.
Okay.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for your time.
See you later.
Thanks for the support.
Hey, thanks to Durand Jones and Aaron Frazier. The new Durand Jones and the Indications record is called American Love Call. Before you get out of here, if you haven't already, subscribe to the series. We put out interviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday over at Consequence of Sound. Would love to keep you up to date. You can subscribe wherever you're listening from right now. That's the bottom line. Anywhere you're listening from right now. And that does include iTunes and Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. After that, you can head to WFPK.org, where I do a show every Monday through Thursday from noon to 3 Eastern, where you can also find some bonus episodes of this series. ConsequenceOfSound.net has all of your music and film news. You can find me at Twitter at Kyle Meredith and Facebook /Kyle Meredith. Does it for another edition. Kyle Meredith. I'll see you next time.
Consequence Podcast Network.